Welcome to the Hotel Moment Podcast, presented by Revenate, the podcast where we talk to leaders in the hospitality industry. If you're looking for trends, perspectives, and stories from leaders in travel and hospitality, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hotel Moment Podcast. I am your host, Karen Stevens, the Chief Revenue Officer of Revenate. This week on the podcast, we are reliving the answers to one of my very favorite questions, which is, what is the most uplifting moment so far in your career? Enjoy.
The things that impact me the most that I go, oh, wow, that was a day that I'll never forget. It was when we were with Travelocity, and it was a travel partner conference, and it was in New Orleans. And so we were one of the first ones after Katrina to come back to the city and figure out, hey, how do we help stimulate business again? And one of the things we did was we did a volunteer day before the partner conference at one of the schools. And I think you were probably part of that. You remember?
I was there, yeah.
We redid their whole playground. Yeah. We just did some amazing things to just renovate that school. And the kids were gone on a field trip while we were doing this. And when they came back, their eyes were like amazed. They had these new basketball courts and everything else. And so it was a very, very rewarding day. And we were doing that side by side with our partners. And so it was just a terrific way to connect with our partners.
And I've been in hospitality for probably, 40 years or more. So that's a tough one. But the uplifting was, there's been one or two. The day of 9/11, I was living in Orlando, and it was just such a sad, shocking, heart-wrenching day that no one really could get their arms around. But all the hotel staff that I had at the Crown Plaza and the Quality Suites that I was managing, I had actually just moved into academia, but all of those hotels that I had just managed, all the associates rallied around the other associates and did a big get together of love. And they called it, I think they even called it silly, like Love Fest. But it was just for those 2 days when nobody could fly, nobody knew what was going on. They went door to door and brought them all together and brought them to the hotel so that we would have some place to be happy together. So it's like, it wasn't the best day in the world by any stretch of anyone's imagination, but it was so heartwarming with what they did that it really lifted me up. And I guess the other one that comes to mind was I had a boss when I was in high school who many, many years later, when he was in his 80s, reached out to me and said, I always knew you'd be in hospitality for life. You told me no. You told me you wanted to be a lawyer. And here I see you in LinkedIn. And I see you in social media, and I get so touched when I can know who in my restaurants is really in it for the right reasons. Aww. And that just totally made me, this business just re-energizes me a lot. But when John called me after all those years, I worked from him from the ages of maybe 15 to 18. So wow. Here I was in my 50s. So that really lifted me up and had a big impact. And I am in it for the right reason. And I love working with people.
The most uplifting moment. It's hard because there really are so many. Like, it's been an insane journey that we've gone through with Muse in the last few years. And it's just what I love most is seeing our team members succeed and really do well. And we've got one team member in our company that has been with me for, my career at Hilton and now at Muse. He landed recently in a role and I can just see him thriving and he's just innovating. When I see someone who I know so well for so many years and see them having looked for the right role and then landing somewhere and doing so well, it truly warms my heart. And I think it's moments like that are really special to me.
Let's see, 40 years, most uplifting moment. Maybe it's a broad answer, but when I see people who we've worked with achieve higher things in their lives, at First Hospitality, we have a program that's called, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's called Live Free, Drive Free. Our hourly associates have an opportunity to win either the rent or mortgage paid for a year or the lease of a new car with insurance for a year. And when you see the impact that has on people's lives, it's overwhelming. It's a very emotional moment, and it's probably, in my 40 years, one of the greatest things that I've seen.
So there is a director of finance for Hyatt right now who works at the Hyatt Centric in Times Square. And when I first met her, I was the controller of the Hyatt Regency Greenwich, and she was the admin working in the engineering department. And she was looking for a new role. And I had an opening as income auditor. So I moved her into finance or into our accounting department. And then I left Greenwich and I went to the corporate office, but watching her career grow year over year. And then she was named manager of the year a couple of years back at the hotel. And her boss called me to tell me that she was a manager of the year, and to think about how her career had grown and where that all started. I think that was probably, one of those great moments of your career, just being able to look back at the people you've worked with and what they've been able to do.
There's a lot, but one was pretty cool. We developed a hotel in Mexico, and bringing my two sons to it was pretty cool. They were kind of like, oh, like, this is where you've been going. Like they just didn't really, they're younger. They're kind of like, at the time they would have been 4 and 6. And so I would just disappear, and they wouldn't really know what I was doing. And kind of having them walk around and like the staff, give them special treats and things like that. And that was pretty cool. But, the business itself just lends itself to a lot of really rewarding moments because you're always interacting with people. And you can make their days, you can make your employees' days, you can make their holiday, you can make their, family vacation, etc.
I guess along those same veins, and it came later on, a couple years later. I don't think I was 15 when it happened, but maybe in my early 20s, and I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Marriott himself. It was really an uplifting experience to see the big boss, a guy that cared enough to come around and visit all of his properties, and to meet the teams that ran those properties and represented the company. In fact, on the day of his visit, the managing director of our property was sick. And so I had the opportunity to lead the tour. Again, I think I was 22 years old, and I was leading Mr. Marriott around the property. And what really came through was the fact that he didn't treat me any differently than he would have the managing director. And so that feeling of respect is something that stood with me for a long time.
Probably where I'm at now, and having come through the industry a little bit and worked with some people, I think it's, there's a few people I feel like have worked with me, worked alongside of me that have come into their careers, come into even their personal lives. I've gotten connected to a few people pretty close, where they came up through an intern, and, a good example is an employee that was at a front desk that showed interest in revenue management years ago, worked his way through the desk, came to the corporate office, went to get his MBA, did an internship with us, came on with us as a revenue manager. And now he's, kind of taken that, was successful with us as a revenue person. And then the entrepreneurial spirit led him to start his own company. And he's really successful with that. So a couple of examples like that of people who are close to me, who I stay in touch with, of just seeing them, go on. It's definitely uplifting to me every time I'll see a LinkedIn post by that person or how well they're doing. I really like that.
I have asked myself this question many times, and I'm very grateful of the career that I have already enjoyed. I've been around 20 years now in hospitality tech, and a bit more in hospitality in general. And to be honest, working with customers that we are so lucky to serve in a company like Oracle Hospitality, for me, has always been like a dream. So since day one until this day. So I have so many moments where I felt we are at the pinnacle here with the customer, with working, for example, at universities, having the opportunity to teach, to show our technology, our industry knowledge at events. I have also the pleasure at several times to work with companies like Apple, like Samsung, collaborate with companies like this. I mean, not now, many years ago, when I think this felt even more exciting than now. And then also, of course, working for an organization like Oracle is very challenging, but I really cannot go to one only because it's so many success stories that we have, right?
Right.
And I was lucky to take part on some of those.
First thing that comes to mind is just the numerous opportunities that I get to interact with our team members. And I can think back even as a GM, being a GM of the hotel. And it's amazing to me and humbling the value that your team members place on your time and your effort and your commitment to them, and to sit down and have a conversation and to listen and think about, and help them, encourage them to contribute to the cause, if you will, right? How are we going to be better? And so I always think in general, I know that's not one specific moment, but most of the time when I think about my career, what's most rewarding is when you help someone see the value in what they do. It lights them up when they think about and how much they value your time and energy. So, I can think about rallying behind, tragedy, different tragic circumstances that we experience in a hotel at different times, and how we pull together as a unit to kind of help navigate, again, the challenges of those circumstances. I think from an accolade perspective, I remember, one of my early GM assignments, I was the general manager of the Omni Richmond Hotel and was selected as the GM of the year for our performance. And that was just such a source of pride, not really for me, but for our team. It was a hotel that was underperforming upon arrival, and we had a lot of opportunities. And the typical, the reputation of the hotel was that it was a tough labor market, and there were lots of reasons why we couldn't be successful, allegedly. And we forged a course and ended up, leading the company in many of the key parameters, to include team member engagement survey, and ultimately received that accolade. But it was really a team award, and just the amount of pride that everybody felt. So early in my career, that was critical. Certainly the appointment to lead this team here at Davidson, with its storied history and the incredible reputation that Davidson already had in the space as an incredible place to work. The integrity, our core values are so critical to us, and that was forged over what's approaching a 50-year history for Davidson. So to be afforded the opportunity to represent this amazing company as chief operating officer is something that it's not lost on me. It's, again, humbling. But again, I think we've more than doubled in size in my 3 years. We're now 80 plus hotels and resorts. We launched a new vertical during my tenure in the resort space. Not that we didn't already operate some resorts, but we had our two existing verticals, our hotels division, and then Pivot, which had been launched in 2016, our lifestyle boutique division, if you will. And then I had the privilege of putting together the A team that we have leading the resorts division, which started with the hiring of Steve Contos, a tremendous resort veteran in the space, and just the talent that we've put around each one of these verticals that understands the nuance of what it takes to operate in these spaces, but still foundationally embraces the core essentials of how we operate, what we call vertical agnostic playbook of Davidson DNA. So I know I'm rambling a bit and jumping around on your inquiry, but it's really it's like an ongoing best day, right? To be chief operating officer of this incredible company.
Oh yeah, there were so many crazy moments and so many experiences. And what I found for myself is that opening a new hotel is always very special, especially, when you start thinking about where you can actually place a hotel or where you can sign a hotel, and start with the initial offer and go into the construction site, and then seeing it filled with people, filled with the furniture and the first guest arriving. This is super special. And yeah, for me also very interesting and comparable with building new technology things in the background. Like, for example, at Ruby, we switched to a new PMS, which was a project of almost 3 years until we had it rolled out for all those hotels. And it is great to create something and then seeing it brought to life or being filled with life with the guests, for example.
Well, it's a tough one, and I think there were so many. If I have to pick one, I would say that when I firstly had my own team, when I was working in Malaysia for IHG Group, so I built the whole team from the scratch. Also introduced the digital marketing expertise concept to the region, to Southeast Asia region, and hired all of the non-hotelier digital geeks at that time in the team. And I think I remember that when we had our first meeting together, that there was a moment I feel like, oh, wow, I've already achieved something. And I believe with the team, and there will be more to come. And it, of course, turned out to be a very successful story. So I still remember the day when I have everybody sitting there when we had the first team meeting.
That is such an ambitious question, right? And so, I was reflecting on that, and I've been blessed to have a pretty long and prosperous career. And there's been many uplifting moments, from starting foundations. I oversaw a foundation with Hard Rock in Orlando. I oversaw a couple different foundations for AEG, including the Grammy Museum, which to me was really uplifting. So these are 501c3s that raise money for everything from music education to, saving the planet as it relates to Hard Rock. We actually now have a foundation here at Outrigger called Outrigger Cares that we stood up during the pandemic, right? What's the old expression? Never let a great crisis go to waste. So we actually were able to do some good things. But the thing that actually, it ties back to COVID and the pandemic that has stuck with me is we had to close the majority of our hotels for a period of time, some as long as 18 months. And one of our properties that we had just finished renovating and then had to close was the Outrigger Waikiki Beachcomber, which we call our first craft hotel, right on Kalakaua Avenue. And it's anchored by Maui Brewing Company, hence the craft designation. We have activity sales there, concierge, Aroma Cafe as well, all local operators. But that was one of the properties we had to shut for nearly 18 months. So I went to the property the day it opened. And as I came through the lobby, the concierge, it's actually an outsourced concierge, but a phenomenal operator, Blue Hawaiian Helicopter Tours, actually is our partner. This big guy who I've known for a long time, but I hadn't seen him for almost a year and a half. He comes up and gives me a hug. And my wife may argue, but I don't think I'm that huggable of a person. And this guy is not. So the two of us hugging each other in the lobby was a little bit weird. It wasn't very busy. I said, why are you hugging me? He goes, I just booked a family of 4 on a helicopter tour. He goes, I have not sold an activity in a year and a half. And he goes, it's just thanks for giving me a purpose again. So that was pretty intense. So I go to the restaurant, and the restaurant is open the first day. I go to the bar. It's like 4:30 in the afternoon, and it was just a long day. So I ordered a beer from the bartender, and she starts crying. I said, what's wrong? Are you okay? And she goes, I remember you. You're one of the executives that comes to our properties and is always really positive, brings us a lot of business. She goes, I got my first tip today in 18 months. And so, we're so focused on recovery and the pandemic that you kind of forget that this is people's livelihoods. This gives them not only, a financial means of surviving and prospering, but also for many of them, it's their sense of purpose to have a job. So, a lot's transpired before and after that. But to me, those are some powerful human moments that are connected to the industry that I think sometimes we just take for granted.
Oh, where do I start, right? I've had so many. I have so many. But one that really comes to mind is that it was a very special moment for me. I was working in a Marriott hotel in Texas. And I had a gentleman and his wife and their young daughter come up to the front desk, and I interacted with them during their stay and checked on them several times to make sure they were having a great stay. And the young girl was probably 8 or 9 or 10. I can't quite remember how old she was. Actually walked up to me and said, when I grow up, I'd like to be a hotel manager. So she was having a conversation with her parents, and I was there, and she looked at me and said, I'd like to be a hotel manager when I grew up. And I was deeply touched by that because, you don't often find people saying, when I grow up, I want to be a hotel manager. People say, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, I want to, be an engineer and all of that. You don't find as many people as who should. I mean, in my opinion, I think more folks need to embrace hospitality. And I think more people need to have aspirations of having careers in hospitality. So I was quite touched by that. It was a very small moment. It wasn't, to most people, they probably would laugh at this and say, oh my God, that's nothing. To me, it was everything coming from such a young person. And I was quite touched. And I thought that was just brilliant. And I still remember that.
It's tough to pinpoint one, right? I mean, they're all about people. There's nothing that has moved me more in this business than things that I've either accomplished with a team or, watching somebody grow in the industry or somebody that, that's done, a small little thing in the hotel that really touched me. So while I struggle to pinpoint one, I can tell you that all the examples I would give you are all about people.
Wow, there have been so many. During the pandemic, there was a time, probably in April or May, if you could, of 2020, if you can go back to that point where the hotel industry had hit rock bottom. I mean, we had occupancy rates that were lower than any time in the history of the industry, far lower than even the Great Depression. And there was not an end in sight. If you recall that time period, we kept thinking, is this going to be over? Is this going to be over? And we didn't know. I mean, no one knew about vaccines moving forward or anything like that. And it did look very bleak. The whole world had come to a stop, especially around travel. And we were able to work with our friends in Congress and get the PPP passed, the Paycheck Protection Program. And that was a lifeline to a lot of friends of mine, specifically hotel owners, who I knew them, I knew their families, I knew how much they had over generations had put into their businesses. And I knew that without some financial assistance, they would go out of business. They would lose everything that their families have been working on, again, in some cases for generations. So being able to be a part of that, help lead that effort and make that happen was great. But seeing what it did for those hotel owners and how it helped many of them stay in business and save their hotel business, that was the most uplifting part.
Yeah, that was an interesting question. I'm thinking about that. And, it's a juxtaposition. It was one of the saddest times in my life. It was 9/11. I was leading a resort at the time called Sun River Resort in Bend, Oregon. Again, we still manage that today. A large, multifaceted resort and a large community that was second homes, about 5,000 home sites. When 9/11 came, and of course, we were all stunned and devastated, glued to our televisions, and yet, we had to go to work that day. And I decided to hold a community vigilant, if you will, and prayer. And we all came together, we told stories, and our employees came. We had about 1,000 employees at the time at Sun River, and the community showed up. And we just sat and talked, and we told about how we were feeling. And it was one of those moments where the business of people, context of team members that were employees or guests in our environment, it was the community at that time. We all dislabeled ourselves and sat together and just talked about unity. And I still think about it. I get little goosebumps when I tell the story, just because it was so meaningful and we were all so in our emotions. And consequently, the relationships going forward with those community members and the team members were just so grossly enhanced because there was this connection that we had. So again, kind of a sad moment in our country's history, but from a business standpoint, it was bringing people together and humanizing us all and really coming together as one. It was quite memorable.
Well, as a hotelier, especially in revenue management, e-commerce, there could be many, because there could be a moment where we achieved the biggest revenue, for example, in the company, right? In 2018, we crossed $2 million in online revenue. But in 2019, we even further crossed it and went beyond $3 million, right? Only in online revenue. But obviously, I think it was during the COVID period that it was that uplifting moment, because what happened in 2020 is that our online revenues and everything, which you can really revenue manage as a revenue management vice president, were all gone. So there were no opportunities for us. And then suddenly in 2021, the company, which our main company, Philinvest, they were launching their own REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. So it is called the Phil REIT. And it gave me an opportunity because they came to me as an expert and said, why don't you head this project for the whole digital marketing? So I created their website, I created all their ads. It was just a period of 3 months in which we had to do everything, because within the next 60 days, the REIT was supposed to be launched. And there was a period of 7 days window within that 7 days, you have to make sure that it's all sold out, right? People are buying it. And we were able to reach 27 million people in the Philippines within a period of 30 days from after the website was launched and everything was launched. And the product got oversubscribed. And it was good enough because I thought that I could only do these things for hospitality because I've always been into hospitality. I'm a hospitality guy who went into tech at some point because of e-commerce, right?
I was fortunate to work in hospitality in the UK around the time of the London Olympics, around 2012. So that was just, an incredible time for the City of London and for the UK generally to be involved in hotels and hospitality. And there was just, such a focus in the management company I worked for on everything that was going on in London. And I had the benefit of traveling down there. And my wife and I watched a few of the Olympic events that were happening around the city. And it was just such a great time to be involved in hotels and hospitality. That was, one of the things that really stands out from my time in the UK was that period of sort of a month or 6 weeks of the London Olympics. It was a great time to be involved.
5 or 6 years ago, I took on my first VP role, and it was because of an acquisition that we had done. And I was kind of granted this whole team from a different perspective, right? I had people report to me before, but never in a leadership capacity where I'm having to lead leaders, essentially. And I had this opportunity to onboard this entire 200 hotel portfolio, teach them, Aimbridge culture, Aimbridge revenue strategy, and then kind of onboard them to the company like that. I had an open director position. So I had the opportunity to identify somebody who could be a good fit and wanted to make sure that I did that within the group that we took on so that we could show, hey, we're here to develop you, and we want to make sure that you have a good future within Aimbridge as well. So there was a woman that was within that group who, with every meeting that we had and every opportunity that came up, she challenged the status quo. Well, I get that we need to do that, but why are we doing that? Why is that important? I don't agree with that. Help me understand. Help me agree. And she really just reminded me of me, right? Like there was an opinion to everything. It was a strong formed an opinion, and she challenged everything that I said. And I thought, she is great at developing other people too, but she was going to be great at developing me into what I needed. And so I immediately identified her and promoted her into a director level position. She is still with us today. She has bounced around to a couple of different really challenging portfolios and is really well known right now for her ability to develop others and work with our ownership groups as well. So I'm super proud of her. And it was the first time that I could really identify and promote into a leadership role as opposed to just promoting from like an entry level to an area manager role.
Thank you for listening to the Hotel Moment podcast. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe for more content. For more information, head to hotelmomentpodcast.com. The Hotel Moment podcast is presented by Revenate and produced by Make More Media.